Joe Biden will not be the nominee.
Something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing.
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr.
No,
President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine.
I wouldn't go with fine as the best description.
According to a shocking report from special counsel Robert Hur, concerns are mounting among Democrats regarding President Biden's deteriorating mental state. Sources reveal that Democrats are increasingly wishing for a way to change the 2024 ticket, fearing that the time to do so may have already passed with the primary calendar in full swing. A well-placed Democratic operative shared on Friday that it's realistic to consider Vice President Kamala Harris replacing Biden due to his diminished capabilities. However, they added that the party's slate of candidates might remain the same as 4 years ago.
So it's interesting. Alicia, I don't blame Joe Biden for being defensive of her husband.
Totally.
I think any woman would do the same thing and make sure that he is protected. She obviously knows what condition she's in. What I do blame her for is the fact that they are continuing this charade.
Well, right, and she's not just a spouse, right? She's not just, and she's the first lady, and she knows very well what she's dealing with. What we don't know is how long she has been leading him along and defending him and all that. And I get it. That's what spouses do. If someone left my husband out to dry, I would end them. And he knows that, and so do the people around him. But I'm not the first lady. And you can think about that in a warm way of like, oh, she's protecting her husband, until you consider in this book, quote, her dislike of Trump was a driving reason behind her support for him to run and for re-election. So she knows exactly who, not only who she's dealing with, who her staff is dealing with, but who the United States has in the White House. And she continues to let him do this, and then it sounds like blame others when he isn't up to the task.
Yeah, and she also has no love for the vice president.
Look, I think the number one takeaway, Trace, is this. Joe Biden will not be the nominee. I said this last year. People dismissed it as some type of conspiracy theory. Today, I think it became that much more obvious. Play this out. Biden's own DOJ and special counsel is effectively releasing a report that undermines the case for him to actually be a candidate for the U.S. presidency, right as Biden's poll numbers are cratering. We have to do the math, skate to where the puck is going, not fall for the deflection. But I do think what they're planning for is to sideline Biden as the nominee, trot in a different puppet instead. That's the most significant takeaway from tonight.
And what do you think caused the most damage, Vivek? I mean, we saw covering live today the report that came down from Robert Hur. It was detrimental. But then you had the news conference tonight. Did the president make a mistake by coming out with this news conference? Would it have been better just to issue a statement and then maybe move on, or at least address it tomorrow? What do you think about the timing and the decision making?
I think the decision making was even poorer than the actual execution of it, both of which were terrible. But I think the reality is this. The managerial class in the Democratic Party, and I believe in the deep state, has decided that they have lost their use for Joe Biden as a puppet. I think they laid a trap for him. They invited him effectively to prove to the American people that he doesn't have the mental acuity to do it. He fell into their trap. And now they're laying the groundwork for in the coming 3 months to sideline him and actually put up who the real nominee is going to be. So I said this at the end of one of the Republican presidential debates, and I'll say it again. Just be honest with the American people. Tell us who the actual nominee is going to be so that we don't play these games and we can actually have an honest, open debate about who should be the next president of the United States, because we know that Joe Biden is not going to be one of those candidates. And I think tonight made that much more clear.
I wonder if you were like a lot of people tonight, Vivek, because the news conference was set for 7:45 Eastern time. It ended up being about 7:55. During that time, during the wait time, which was a better part of an hour, did you at any time think, like a lot of people did, that Joe Biden was going to come out and make some bold statement, maybe not to run for re-election?
I think that there was probably a discussion heading into it. And the reality is the Democratic Party has always had one obstacle stopping them from sidelining Joe Biden. That's what I call the Kamala Harris problem. They've tethered their identity to identity politics, Yet if they don't make her the nominee, it makes them very difficult to sideline Biden, which is what leads me to, I think, the likely conclusion that it is going to be someone like Michelle Obama who they do put up. So I think there are serious discussions likely underway. Pretty soon those are going to spill over into the public sphere. And I wouldn't have been shocked if that happened tonight, but I think the greater likelihood, Trace, is that they wait another couple of months and let this play out.
We talked about the mistakes that he made, and this is my last question to you, Vivek. Thank you for coming on. We talked about the mistakes the president made tonight after trying to convince America that he had a sound mind. What struck me the most was his back and forth with a reporter where she was saying that America is concerned about your mental acuity, and he said, that's your take, that's your opinion, that's your... And it really wasn't, because it's been happening all day. Very defensive about that.
Look, it does seem increasingly like a form of elder abuse, Trace. I mean, this is a man who was clearly personally hurt, personally insulted, but didn't have the mental acuity to process or even communicate the extent to which he had been hurt or insulted. And so the reality is this man is a puppet. The puppet masters who are wielding him have lost their use, and it's really just a sad situation to watch play out in plain sight, where this is the president of the United States. This was a man who ran on a campaign to reunite this country. And I think that this is a chance for the Republican Party to now take that mantle. This man said he wanted to unite the country. He failed. He lacks the acuity to do it. I think in the Republican nominee, that'll be President Trump, we have an opportunity for someone with the acuity to say that we will unite this country. And I think that's how we're going to win this in a landslide.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
And, you know, that has been made plain. But let's talk a little bit about this New York Post headline. There was an op-ed, and it's titled, Joe Biden and Dems committed elder abuse on Joe. Now they must force him to step aside. And there's a quote from within the article from the editorial board. Joe Biden knew, his aides knew. Heck, James Clyburn, the entire Democratic establishment knew, yet terrified that Bernie Sanders would win the nomination and then failed to take down their mortal enemy, Donald Trump. They propped up Biden like he was a Potemkin candidate, or more accurately, weakened at Bernie's to try to capture some of the Obama nostalgia. It's time for those same Democrats who lied to get Biden into the White House to tell them that he must step aside before the 25th Amendment is invoked. Reasonable words, Joe?
Reasonable up until the 25th Amendment part, because then you need 2/3 of the House to remove him. And you don't get 2/3 of anything anymore. And Democrats, obviously, that would be the huge embarrassment for the party, and that's not the way they want him to go. Joe Biden had hinted in 2019 that he would be a one-term president. His job was to get Donald Trump out and then hand the baton off to, Kamala Harris, who's currently polling at 28% approval. But Jill Biden has been very
slightly
successful.
less popular than wildfires.
It's like gas station sushi at this point. You know, it's about that kind of popularity. So she's not an option at this point. But Jill Biden has been very successful in terms of keeping him out of the spotlight. I mean, let's count the ways. He hasn't had a formal TV interview since October. Think about that. And that was a T-ball session with Scott Pelley. After he won South Carolina, that was the first primary for the Democratic Party. Wins it resoundingly, as he was expected. Most people go out and do a victory speech around 9 or 10 o'clock when they call it. He phoned it in, literally did it by video instead. We attacked the Houthis, and there's no address to the nation after that. You can't win the presidency again without COVID by pleading the fifth and hiding in a basement. He has to defend his record. The problem is when they put him in front of a television camera, as we saw on Thursday with that press conference, it's a cleanup not only in aisle 5, but 12, 17, and 24.
Yeah, he can't read the prompter, Joey. He can't talk extemporaneously. There are Democrats saying, well, maybe he should wear better makeup. And do everything seated. Even Hillary Clinton has said, yeah, you know what? The age factor really is a deal.
Yeah, think about how you start this with Lisa. You're like, listen, I don't blame a spouse for taking up for their spouse. I agree with you if somebody were picking on him because he had stuff in his teeth at the dinner table. He's the commander-in-chief of our country. If he wants to stand in front of a podium and talk for 2 hours, we should want him to do that. Most importantly, he should be capable of doing that. And that is the problem. Jill Biden has no place blaming a staff for not turning her husband into a puppet different than what he is. Getting mad at them is like getting mad in the mirror. You're not going to get anything from it if you don't have some self-awareness. The self-awareness here, it was the only saving grace they could have ever had, because in a primal manner we respect someone who is honest about themselves. We may not always reward it, and he may not get reelected in either way here. But if a year ago he would have gone down the path of, yeah, I'm forgetful, I'm 80 years old, but I've built this team around me. I've been here for 50 years. I'm guiding this ship. That's why I have the people on the riggers, and started down that path to create excuses that people find reasonable, he might be in a little bit better place, and we might not have the opportunity to jump on every, what he would call gaffe, I would say memory lapse, or just absolute period of blank stare. Unfortunately, he's continued to lie. His staff's continued to lie. He didn't build a good team, and there's nothing left for them to rest their hat on.